Imagine for a moment that the very thing you've been seeking, peace of mind, clarity, strength, a sense of belonging, is not far away, not in the next chapter of your life, not after you fix everything that feels broken, not after you finally earn it. It is here, not just near, but here. The kingdom is at hand. As Emmet Fox once taught, the teachings of Jesus were not vague symbols or moralistic tales. They were precise instructions for personal transformation. He spoke not to control others, but to awaken them. His words were blueprints, showing exactly how to reclaim dominion over your inner world and bring it into harmony with divine law. So before we journey inward, I invite you to like and subscribe, but only if it truly resonates with your soul. Now listen closely. The kingdom of heaven is not a myth, nor a distant afterlife. It is a spiritual condition, a mental reality that you can access when your thought aligns with truth. It has nothing to do with buildings, borders, or rituals, and everything to do with your inner state. That's why Jesus didn't say, "The kingdom will come when the world changes." He said, "The kingdom is at hand, within reach, accessible now." But the tragedy is this. Most people live as if they are exiled from it. They move through life looking for scraps of approval, fleeting pleasures, and temporary control, never realizing that what they truly hunger for is not out there. It is within. You don't have to become someone else to enter the kingdom. You have to remember who you are and unlearn the noise that's made you forget. The gate isn't guarded. The lock was never real. The only barrier is belief. This is why Jesus so often began with a single word: repent, but not in the fire and brimstone sense. The Greek word is metanoia, which literally means change your mind, not feel shame, not crawl to God in guilt. Simply change your mind, shift your inner direction, rethink what you believe is true about reality and about yourself. This is the beginning of everything. If you keep trying to fix the outer world without shifting your inner lens, you'll stay trapped in a cycle of repeating patterns. You'll blame people, circumstances, even fate. But you'll miss the truth. As within, so without. The kingdom is not something you fight for. You don't take it by force. It opens when you stop resisting your own divine nature. When you release the grip of false beliefs, the gate swings open. This is not about pretending life is perfect. It's about seeing clearly your external life is a mirror of your internal state. That doesn't mean you caused every painful event. It means you always have the power to respond, to reframe, to re-choose. You have the power now, not after years of spiritual practice, not after reading every sacred text. Now, because the kingdom is not a reward for the righteous, it is the natural home of the awakened. It is the place you were always meant to live from, not just reach for. And that place begins with a single decision: to wake up. It's subtle, but life-changing. You begin to see differently. The old urgency to prove yourself dissolves. You stop needing to win arguments or play roles. You listen more. You force less. You begin to sense a quiet rhythm beneath the chaos. It's always been there, but you were too busy to hear it. That's the rhythm of the kingdom. It's not about escaping the world. It's about engaging it from a higher consciousness, not reacting but responding, not struggling but directing. And slowly, your world begins to shift. Because you're no longer living from fear, you're living from truth. Somewhere along the line, you were taught that spiritual growth had to be hard, that you had to sacrifice joy, abandon ambition, or live in solemn detachment. But what if none of that is true? What if spiritual power is actually the most natural thing in the world? What if you were born with access to it? What if the kingdom has been whispering your name, not as a test, but as an invitation? You're not starting from zero. You're remembering something ancient, something deeper than memory. The kingdom is not a concept, it's a knowing. A place in you that never left God, a place that's still whole, even if your surface life is not. And once you taste it, even briefly, you'll never again settle for cheap substitutes. You'll stop chasing approval because you'll already feel chosen. You'll stop hoarding because you'll feel supplied. You'll stop controlling because you'll trust the current of divine order beneath all things. This is not mystical idealism. This is practical transformation. The kingdom is not a Sunday idea. It's a Monday morning compass, a Tuesday afternoon power source, a Friday night anchor. It is meant to be lived in meetings, in silence, in conflict, in creation, everywhere. And so the first key is simple. Accept that the kingdom is real and that it is not separate from you. Stop thinking it exists somewhere else. Begin where you are. Let go of trying to be more spiritual and start being more present. Because when you are present, fully, honestly, humbly, you step into alignment. And from alignment, everything else becomes possible. The kingdom is at hand. And now, you know where to look. You've heard it said before, be in the world, but not of it. It's a phrase so often quoted, it risks sounding like spiritual wallpaper. But if you dare to hear it fresh, to strip away the familiarity, it becomes something sharper, clearer. It becomes instruction. Because the kingdom that Jesus spoke of was never of this world. Not the world of appearances, not the tangled systems of fear and pride, not the world of status, punishment, or blind conformity. His message was not about establishing a utopia on the surface, it was about awakening to a realm of being that transcends surface entirely. You live in this world, yes. You interact with it, work in it, build relationships within it. But you are not of it. Your essence, your real self, is not born of the material system. It is rooted in the unseen, in the eternal, in the field of divine intelligence that undergirds all form, yet is not bound by any of it. The world system teaches competition. The kingdom teaches clarity. The world tells you to hustle for approval. The kingdom invites you to stand in knowing. The world says you must earn peace by fixing everything out there. But the kingdom reminds you, peace begins when you take dominion in here. And that dominion is not about control, it's about alignment. True authority, the kind Jesus modeled, is not about dominating others. It's the quiet mastery of self. It's the ability to respond from truth rather than react from programming. The kingdom is not an idea you admire. It's a state you enter, not through rituals or dogma or even belief alone, but by shifting the seat of your identity. You stop identifying as a body among bodies and start living as consciousness expressing itself in form. You stop obeying fear and begin listening to the deeper current, the one that always knows. This is the revolution Jesus ignited. It was never meant to be a religion. It was a revolt of awareness, a call to exit the hypnotic trance of this world's values and live from a higher order. That's why his message frightened systems of power. He wasn't telling people to rebel politically. He was showing them how to transcend mentally, and nothing threatens control like a mind that no longer plays by the old rules. When you begin to see this, everything shifts. You no longer chase validation from the world because you realize the world cannot give you what you truly need. Its rewards are temporary. Its standards are shifting. Its promises come with hidden costs. But the kingdom? It is built on eternal principles, law, love, order, truth. These are not religious slogans. They are spiritual realities. And when you begin to live from them, you will become both steady and surprising. People won't understand you, and you won't need them to, because you will be living from a different source. You'll be in the world, but governed by something deeper. And that something is not abstract. It is the mind of God, the universal intelligence that holds galaxies in motion and still knows the number of hairs on your head. It is available to you, not as an idea, but as your daily mode of operation. But to live this way, you must be willing to walk away from the noise, not physically, mentally, emotionally. You must question the beliefs you inherited from a world obsessed with survival, appearance, and approval. You must unlearn the lie that says you are only as worthy as your productivity, your performance, or your image. And that's not easy, because the world has trained you well. It rewards conformity. It flatters the ego. It sells fear dressed as wisdom, and it will not applaud your inner freedom. But that's the price of the kingdom. You must stop asking the world for permission to be whole. You will still pay your bills, still show up to work, still live in the flow of daily life. But you will do it from a different place. A place of deep center. A place that doesn't grasp or chase or panic. A place that remembers what's real. Jesus was clear, "My kingdom is not of this world." Not because the world is bad, but because the world is too small to hold the truth of who you are. You are not a role, not a label, not even your story. You are the awareness behind it all. The spark that sees, that chooses, that creates. You are here to remember that, and then live like it. That's why the kingdom isn't something you ascend to after death. It's something you awaken to in life. The only death required is the death of illusion, the ending of false identification, the surrender of mental habits that keep you small. And here's the paradox. When you truly step into this inner kingdom, you become more present, not less, more grounded, not detached, more useful in the world, not removed from it. Because now you are no longer entangled in it. You are free to serve, to build, to connect, from clarity rather than compulsion. You are no longer of this world. You are of truth, of purpose, of divine mind. So walk through this world, but walk as one who remembers where home truly is. The moment you begin to change your mind, the universe begins to change with you. That's not poetry. It's law. Not a wish, but a mechanism. And that's what Jesus was pointing to every time he said, "Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand." Again, we've heard it filtered through dogma. We've associated repentance with shame, with groveling, with confessing how unworthy we are. But that's not what the original word meant. The Greek metanoia means this: a profound change of mind, a total reorientation of how you think, what you believe, and how you interpret reality. So let's say it clearly. To repent is to realign, to shift from the thought patterns of fear to the thought patterns of truth, from separation to unity, from chaos to divine order. And that shift, that internal pivot, is the most powerful thing you will ever do. Because it doesn't just change how you feel, it begins to change what you experience. Your outer world reorganizes to match your inner allegiance, not instantly, not always dramatically, but certainly, quietly, consistently. You see, you don't live in the world, you live in your interpretation of it. Two people can face the same event and have completely different realities because their perception shapes what they see, how they feel, what they do next. The lens is the difference. So when you change your mind, you are not denying the facts. You are choosing the lens. You are choosing to no longer be hypnotized by appearances. You are choosing to see from the higher altitude of truth. That's metanoia. That's repentance, not punishment. Permission. Permission to wake up, to come home, to think again. Not with the programmed mind of survival, but with the clear mind of spirit. And here's what many miss. Repentance isn't a one-time decision. It's a way of life. Because every day, every moment, you are either slipping into old grooves or renewing your alignment. That's not pressure, it's freedom. Because you are never trapped. You are never stuck. You can change direction at any time. The ego wants you to believe change takes years, that healing is a long uphill climb, that transformation must be earned by suffering. But Jesus taught the opposite. He healed in an instant, not because he was performing miracles, but because he saw beyond the illusion. He called people out of false identification and into truth. And the moment they believed, the body followed. The moment they agreed with wholeness, the outer reflected it. Because again, as within, so without. This is not metaphysical fluff, it's practical law. The universal mind, the divine intelligence you are part of, responds not to begging, but to belief. And belief is simply sustained thought, not wishful thinking, not forced affirmations, but conviction, clarity, inner alignment. So let me ask you, without asking it like a preacher, where are you placing your allegiance today? Are you aligning with fear and expecting peace to come anyway? Are you rehearsing old wounds and waiting for life to feel new? Are you holding resentment and wondering why you feel stuck? This is not judgment. This is awareness, and awareness is the beginning of freedom. Changing your mind doesn't mean pretending you're okay. It means recognizing that even in your pain, even in your confusion, you have a choice to turn, a choice to return, a choice to withdraw your power from false conclusions and invest it back into truth. Because that's all a belief is, a conclusion you've repeated. And most of them were inherited. You picked them up without consent, from your upbringing, your culture, your pain. And you thought they were truth because they felt familiar. But now you know better. And once you know, you cannot unknow. You can only delay. And delay is the real danger, not because God punishes you, but because life responds to your posture. And when you continue to think small, think angry, think broken, the world you experience will mirror that posture. So this is the great invitation to think again, not by force but by insight, not by fear but by willingness. You don't need to fix every belief at once. You don't need to uproot every wound tonight. You only need to begin noticing where your mind has been operating on autopilot, and then gently reclaim the wheel. You can say, wait. That thought I've been carrying, that I'm not enough, that I'm too late, that it's too hard, that's not mine. I don't have to keep feeding it. I can release it. I can choose something better. And every time you do that, every time you shift your thought, you are opening the gate. You are stepping into the kingdom, not through force, but through agreement. You are saying, I agree with truth. I agree with peace. I agree with possibility. And that agreement starts moving everything, your emotions, your choices, your energy, your circumstances. Not always in ways you expect, but always in ways that reflect the shift. So the next time life presses in on you, before you react, stop. Remember, you are not the reaction. You are the one who chooses the response. And the moment you choose from truth rather than trauma, you've already entered the kingdom. This is the freedom Jesus taught. Not external liberation, but inner authority. Not behavior management, but thought transformation. Change your mind. Change your world. The world you walk through each day is not as solid as it seems. Yes, the chair under you feels firm. The walls stand still. The numbers in your account are tracked and real. But these are the forms of things, not the forces behind them. Because behind every appearance is a pattern. And behind every pattern is a thought. This is the law of correspondence. As above, so below. As within, so without. Your outer world is not random. It is the echo of your inner world, extended and mirrored back to you. Not as punishment, not as reward, but as reflection. Neutral, precise, just. This law is not personal, but it is intimate. It doesn't respond to your hopes or your self-image. It responds to your dominant thought, your feeling tone, the convictions you rehearse when no one's watching. So if your world feels chaotic, stop looking outside for the cause. Ask, where has my mind been scattered? Where have I been agreeing with fear? Where am I out of alignment with what I say I want? The law will not lie to you. It cannot. It reflects. It reveals. It responds. That's why Jesus never said blame the world and wait for rescue. He said in essence, get your house in order. Begin where you have power, within. Let your thoughts obey divine logic, and the outer will follow, not by magic, by law. Emmet Fox understood this deeply. He taught that if you could change your thought, truly change it, not just wish for better, you would change the condition, because the condition is the fruit. The thought is the seed. But most people live from the outside in. They react to circumstances as if the circumstance has all the power. They look at a negative balance, a broken relationship, a diagnosis, and they collapse. Not because the condition is fatal, but because they forget where their true power lives. This is what the world teaches. to fear what it shows you. But the kingdom teaches you to go higher, to rise in thought, not in denial but in dominion. Because when your mind begins to obey spiritual law, when it becomes orderly, clear, and rooted in truth, everything around you begins to organize. Confusion fades, drama dissolves, provision comes, not because you manipulated events, but because you stopped resisting order. Divine order is not rigid. It is not control. It is harmony, flow, intelligence in motion. When your thought flows with it, peace becomes natural. You start to feel carried rather than pushed. You act from clarity instead of urgency. You say no without guilt, yes without fear. But if your mind remains divided, if you think truth one moment and fear the next, the signal becomes scrambled. The results become inconsistent. You wonder why your affirmations don't work, but you ignore the root. Do your emotions match your claims? Does your attention support your words? Because the law reads not your surface, but your signal, and your signal is set by what you consistently dwell on, not what you momentarily hope for. This is why Jesus spoke so often of focus. Let your eye be single, he said. In other words, let your attention be undivided. Let your inner vision point in one direction, truth, peace, wholeness. When your thought is single, your path becomes straight. But let's be clear, this is not about controlling every stray emotion. It's about choosing where you live, what thought you return to, what vibration you nourish. You will still feel fear. You will still face doubt. But when your base setting is truth, the fear doesn't derail you. It passes. The storm comes, but you don't panic. You anchor. Because you've made the shift. You've stopped giving chaos the authority to define your experience. And as you stay consistent, the law responds. Slowly at first, then faster. It's like tuning a frequency. At first, there's static. But as you adjust, clarity emerges, and with it, results. People will notice. They'll wonder why you seem unshaken, why doors open for you, why things just seem to work out. But it won't be luck. It will be law, and you will know it, because you'll feel it first, not in the form, but in the inner resonance, the way your body softens when you're aligned, the way your thoughts feel quiet, clean, free. This is not about perfection. It's about rhythm, about returning to order every time you drift. That's the practice, not forcing outcomes, but training your inner world to reflect the divine. And from there, your life becomes an extension of that order. Your conversations shift, your choices sharpen, your priorities refine. Not because you're trying harder, but because you're thinking clearer. You stop needing to fix everything out there, because you realize there is no out there. There is only reflection. And when the root is healed, the fruit follows. So if your world feels loud, go silent. If it feels broken, go inward. If it feels unfair, go higher. Bring your mind into order and watch the law respond. There is a king in your life, whether you've acknowledged it or not. Something sits at the center of your inner court, issuing commands, setting your direction, filtering how you interpret every event that comes your way. That king is not your emotions. It's not your past. It's not even your personality. The king is mind, your faculty of thought, imagination, and intention. And like any king, your mind either rules with wisdom or reacts in fear. Either way, your life obeys it. This is the essence of metaphysical truth. You create your experience through consciousness, not by brute force, not by controlling other people, but by governing thought. That is your dominion. That is your inheritance. Jesus didn't preach escape. He preached authority, not over others, but over self. And he made it clear. The kingdom of God is within you, not above, not beyond, within. The throne is in your own mind, and the scepter is your attention. So the question is not, is the kingdom real? The question is, who is ruling in your kingdom? Is it fear, habit, the need for approval, the illusion of limitation? Or is it clarity, faith? A quiet certainty that divine mind expresses through you? Emmet Fox put it plainly, "You are not the victim of circumstances, you are the master of your life to the extent that you understand the laws of thought." That's not motivational hype, that's spiritual mechanics. You are creating conditions day by day based on what you consent to in thought. And most people give away that consent too easily. They react to headlines, they absorb the moods of others, they let worry set the tone, they forget that their inner world is sacred territory, and they let intruders roam freely. But you don't have to live that way. You can reclaim your throne. It begins by noticing your thoughts, not judging them, but becoming aware. What tone do they carry? What assumptions do they reveal? What direction are they leading you? Because thought is not neutral, it's formative. Every idea you hold shapes something. Your attitude, your choices, your emotional weather. Even your posture shifts with the thought you entertain. So when you begin to choose thought consciously, you begin to lead your life instead of trailing behind it. This isn't about pretending everything is okay. It's about choosing how you interpret what's happening and where you focus your response. That's where power lives. Let's say a problem arises. Most people immediately sink into it. They rehearse the worst-case scenario. They identify with the obstacle. They tell others how unfair or frightening it is. And slowly, they energize it. They crown it as king. But the spiritually awake person responds differently. They observe the problem, but don't bow to it. They ask, "What am I being invited to learn here? What truth can I affirm even in this?" They recognize that problems are not dictators, they are messengers, temporary, transformable. Because mind is king, not conditions, not appearances, not emotions. And when you train your mind to obey spiritual law, your world begins to follow suit. Not always immediately, but inevitably. Why? Because the outer must reflect the inner. That is law. This is the deeper meaning behind Jesus' calm in the storm, his silence before accusers, his refusal to flinch when others panicked. He didn't react because his mind wasn't ruled by the world. It was governed by God, and the same is available to you, not as a doctrine, but as a daily practice. You wake up in the morning, and instead of letting the day define your mood, you set the tone. You anchor your thought. You remind yourself, "I am the steward of this mind. I choose what enters, what stays, what creates." That's not delusion. That's maturity. Spiritual maturity is not about knowledge. It's about inner discipline, about thinking on purpose, feeling on purpose, speaking on purpose. And when you do, you begin to notice something. You stop being triggered so easily. You stop waiting for permission to be peaceful. You stop letting others write your script. Because you've taken your throne, you're not perfect, but you're present. Not immune to pain, but immune to chaos. Not numb, but steady, and people will feel it. Your presence will carry weight. Your words will land differently. Your energy will shift a room. Not because you're trying to impress, but because you're radiating from the core. This is the kingdom lived, not someday, but now. So if mind is king, train it like royalty, feed it with truth, guard it with discernment, align it with love, and when it wanders, as it will, call it home, gently, firmly, again and again, because the throne is yours, and the crown is waiting. Resist not evil. Of all the teachings Jesus offered, few are as widely misunderstood as this one. At first hearing, it can sound passive, even weak, as if to say, "Let the world walk over you." Accept harm without defense. Be silent in the face of injustice. But that is not the message. This command, when read metaphysically, is not about surrendering your dignity. It is about reclaiming your power at the deepest level. To resist not evil means to stop feeding energy into what you do not want. It means withdrawing your attention, your fear, and your identification from the lower vibration so that it loses its grip over you. Not because you're ignoring it, but because you're refusing to energize it. Resistance is not strength. It's still a form of focus. And what you focus on, you amplify. When you meet fear with fear, you don't reduce it, you multiply it. When you fight darkness with hate, you become its echo. And when you obsess over the problem, even in the name of solving it, you strengthen the very thing you're trying to escape. So Jesus said, "Resist not." Because he understood spiritual law, he knew that your attention is creative. He knew that what you dwell on becomes your experience. And he was teaching you the most powerful form of authority, the refusal to enter the arena of illusion. This doesn't mean you ignore problems. It means you approach them from a higher place. Instead of reacting with the same energy that created the issue, you pause, you breathe, you rise in thought, you remember who you are and what realm you serve. Because evil, when seen clearly, is not a cosmic force. It's a misalignment, a distortion, a false belief expressing itself through fear, greed, ignorance, or pain. And the only way to truly dissolve it is to stop agreeing with it. You cannot fight illusion into truth. You must see through it, withdraw your allegiance, and bring in light. This is the foundation of spiritual strength. It's not the might of the fist, it's the stillness of the center, the refusal to panic, the choice to respond rather than react. And it is not easy. Everything in the world teaches you to react, to defend, to retaliate. You were trained to think that anger is power, that shouting is clarity, that domination is victory. But what has that training produced? More pain, more division, more cycles that never end. You are here to break the cycle. You are here to live from a different law. And that law begins where resistance ends, where your mind stops wrestling with shadows and starts standing in light, where you remember that the only power any condition has is the power you give it in thought. So, what does this look like in practice? It means when fear rises, you don't push it down, you observe it, you name it. You remind yourself, this is not the truth of me, and you choose again. It means when conflict appears, you don't match its chaos. You hold the vibration of clarity. You speak from peace, not silence out of fear, but voice rooted in knowing. It means when the world says, fight back, you say, I'll go higher. Not out of avoidance, but because you understand that true change does not come from the same consciousness that created the problem. This is not a call to apathy. It is a call to mastery, to intervene from presence, to engage with power that is not reactive, but radiant. You see, when you stop resisting, you start creating. You become an instrument of new vibration. You break the momentum of negativity. You stop feeding the system of fear, and in doing so, you begin to dismantle it. This is what Jesus demonstrated again and again. He didn't fight the Roman Empire. He didn't resist the accusers. He held to truth. He stayed aligned. He refused to let their fear shape his state of being. And that unshakable inner state had more impact than any protest, any sword, any decree. Because true change begins with vibration, with consciousness, with the energy you bring into the situation. If you want to transform your world, you must first become unavailable for reaction. You must become grounded, clear, steady, able to walk into the storm without becoming it, able to witness pain without identifying as it, able to name what's wrong while still standing in what's right. This is not theory, this is practice. And it starts today. When someone insults you, don't resist, rise. When fear whispers, don't argue, redirect. When the problem screams, don't panic, pause. You are not here to be at war with appearances. You are here to establish truth, first in your own consciousness, then through your presence in the world. This is not weakness. It is the most potent kind of power, the kind that doesn't need to shout, the kind that doesn't burn out, the kind that transforms, not through force, but through frequency. So remember, resist not evil is not a rule to obey. It's a reality to embody. A shift from reacting to choosing, from defending to creating, from wrestling to rising. Let the world do what it does. You are not here to match its madness. You are here to carry its cure. Judgment is one of the most deceptive mental habits. It can masquerade as discernment, as clarity, even as righteousness. But at its root, Judgment always contains a lie, the lie of separation. When you judge another, you divide yourself from them. You assert superiority. You anchor yourself into the illusion that their behavior defines their being and that your opinion holds weight in spiritual law. But spiritual law does not bend to opinion. It reflects vibration. What you condemn in another, you bond yourself to. That's not metaphor. It's mechanics. The judgment you place on others reinforces the structure of that energy in your own consciousness. When you call someone unworthy, when you fixate on their flaw, when you mentally punish or diagnose, you are not rising. You are sinking into the very condition you think you're above. Emmet Fox once said, "You cannot criticize another without lowering your own vibration." Not because it's morally wrong, but because it reveals that you are still vibrating at the level of what you attack. And in spiritual law, like attracts like, not because of what you believe, but because of what you are in consciousness. So if you want freedom, judgment must go. But that is not an easy release. The mind finds safety in judgment. It feels momentarily strong. It fills space. It defines borders. It gives you the illusion that you are separate, sovereign, in control. But control is not power, and separation is not truth. You are not separate from what you judge. That person you resent, that group you demonize, that mistake you endlessly analyze, all of it lives somewhere inside you, not literally, but as resonance. That's why it catches your attention. That's why it unsettles you. That's why you can't let it go, because some part of you still believes in it, still fears it, still relates to it. And until that part is healed, not punished, but healed, you will continue to recreate the pattern. Different faces, different scenes, same echo. So judgment must break, not for their sake, but for yours. When you judge, you close the channel. You seal your energy into a tight loop of smallness. You can no longer receive divine ideas because your mind is occupied with limitation. You can't feel joy because you are reinforcing pain. You can't breathe deeply because you are holding tightly. There comes a point in the spiritual path where judgment simply becomes too expensive. It costs your peace. It costs your clarity. It costs your access to truth. And in that moment, when you are finally tired of being right, of proving your point, of holding that mental grudge, you fall open. The mind drops. The breath returns. The inner fist unclenches. And what was once clenched in resentment becomes flooded with light. That's not forgetting. That's release. That's the moment of break. And it feels like death. Because it is. It's the death of the part of you that thought judgment protected you. That thought moral superiority made you whole. That thought you had to carry offense as proof of your integrity. But when that part dies, you don't disappear. You wake up. You return to a deeper self, one that sees clearly, not blindly forgiving, but truly understanding. You no longer excuse the behavior, but you no longer anchor yourself to it. You become free. You become light. Forgiveness, then, is not something you do after judging. It's what happens instead of judgment. It's the natural state of a mind that no longer feels separate. And when you forgive, not performatively but deeply, you rise in vibration, not into sentimentality, but into alignment. And from there, your conditions begin to shift. Because your energy no longer attracts the echo of your resentment. This is not weakness. This is precision. The strongest people are not those who correct the most. They are those who reflect the most, who see themselves in others, who understand that every offense is an opportunity to rise in thought. That's the real work. Not to justify pain, but to reclaim authority. Not to rewrite history, but to stop reliving it. Not to fix others, but to clear the pattern in yourself. And this pattern will try to hold on. It will whisper that you are letting them off the hook, that you're losing your edge, that you're making it okay. But nothing about healing makes the past okay. It simply makes you free. So if you feel heavy with judgment toward others, toward yourself, ask, what part of me still believes this story? And then listen, not for justification, but for release. because the moment you're willing to break, to die to that version of self who needs to be right, something holy happens. The dead feeling, the numbness, the isolation, the endless looping is pierced. The light rushes in, and it doesn't come with fanfare. It comes with stillness, a sacred silence that says, "You've come home. You no longer need the story. You no longer need the wound. You no longer need to defend the pain." And in that moment, judgment ends. Not because you forced it to, but because love had room to return. Desire, when misread, can lead to torment. It begins pure, an inner signal, a pull toward greater life, but quickly becomes distorted. The mind, still steeped in old programming, turns that signal into grasping. It wraps the desire in fear, in timelines, in urgency. And before long, what began as inspiration becomes a burden. You want it so badly you can't breathe around it. You pray for it, affirm it, script it, plead for it, and it doesn't come. Not because you are unworthy, not because the universe is cruel, but because desire cannot be fulfilled from the level of need. It can only be fulfilled from the level of knowing. Jesus gave this formula simply: ask, believe, receive. Not as a slogan, but as an energetic sequence, a rhythm of creation. Ask, meaning become clear. Align your thought. Set the direction of your attention. Believe, not as intellectual assent, but as inner certainty. The kind of belief that doesn't wobble when appearances contradict it. The kind that doesn't start doubting the moment something looks unchanged. And receive, not chase, not force, not manipulate, but allow, make space, stay available to the answer, even if it comes in a form your ego didn't expect. The gap between asking and receiving is only as long as your belief takes to stabilize. Not belief in a fantasy, but belief in law, in order, in the fact that the spiritual realm responds precisely, generously, without confusion or delay, when you are in alignment. That's why desire must be purified, not repressed, purified, cleansed of urgency, stripped of fear, refined into vision. So what does that look like? It looks like this. You still want the thing, but you no longer believe it is the answer to your wholeness. You desire it, but you don't define yourself by whether or not you have it. You move toward it, but you stop clutching it. You stop leaking energy around it. You stop using its absence as proof of lack. And in that release, something shifts. You rise. You begin to vibrate from fullness, not scarcity. And from that fullness, life moves toward you. Not because you demanded it, but because you matched it. This is the metaphysical truth behind prayer. It's not about convincing God. It's about conforming your thought to divine law. About tuning your inner instrument until it resonates with the answer, rather than the problem. That's why so many prayers seem unanswered. Because they are soaked in fear, dressed in spiritual words. They ask, but they don't believe. Or they believe, but keep checking the clock. Or they believe, but only if it comes in the exact way they imagined. But real spiritual maturity knows this. You can trust the delivery, even if you don't control the form. You can trust the principle, even if the timing stretches you. You can know that your good is seeking you, as surely as you are seeking it, if you'll stop getting in the way. Getting in the way means watching for signs every 5 minutes. It means panicking when things don't move fast enough. It means declaring, "It's not working," before life has had a chance to organize around your new vibration. That's not belief. That's anxiety in disguise. And anxiety is not a sin, but it's not a power source either. Your real power comes when you become quiet. Not passive, quiet, steady, non-reactive, certain in the invisible. You don't need to yell at the mountain. You just need to stop doubting the climb. You don't need to repeat your affirmation 300 times a day. You just need to stop canceling it with a flood of opposite thoughts. Because what you feel in your core always overrides what you say with your lips, so check the core. Do you believe that your desire is aligned with truth? That it comes from spirit? Then stop shrinking around it. Stop apologizing for it. Stop treating it like something distant and fragile. Desire is a signal, but belief is the current. And when those two meet, without resistance, without grasping, the channel opens. You don't make it happen. You let it arrive. And you recognize it when it does, even if it shows up as a nudge, an invitation, a shift in your own perception. Sometimes the thing you thought you wanted fades, and peace takes its place. Sometimes the answer comes sideways, disguised as loss or delay. Sometimes the very act of believing changes you so deeply that the outer condition simply reconfigures itself. This is the mystery and the mercy of spiritual law. It gives you what aligns with your true vibration, not your temporary obsession. So if you're in that place, the in-between, the not yet, the waiting, don't panic, don't spiral, don't give up, rise instead, sink beneath the surface story, break the pattern of chasing, return to the center where your good is already yours in essence, even if not yet in form. Ask from clarity, believe with steadiness, receive with openness, and let it come. Every morning you are given a sacred opportunity. It doesn't arrive with fanfare. It isn't wrapped in revelation. It comes quietly, almost invisibly, disguised as routine. But it holds the key to your entire spiritual growth. That opportunity is this. What will you feed today? Because you are always planting something, a thought, a reaction, a belief. And whatever you feed through attention, emotion, repetition, that becomes your harvest. When Jesus said, "Give us this day our daily bread," he wasn't speaking only of physical nourishment. He was pointing toward spiritual sustenance, the kind of inner nourishment that shapes your state of mind, and by extension, your experience of life. He was speaking to the daily choice to align with truth, regardless of what the world shouts. You are not here to live off yesterday's breakthroughs. You are not here to carry forward last year's fears. You are here to choose again, to create fresh alignment, to renew the soil of your thought, to let Spirit speak into today. Because if you don't consciously choose your vibration, your environment will choose it for you. And the world is loud with fear, with distraction, with subtle suggestions that you are not enough, not ready, not safe. So you must wake up and claim your portion, not just once in a while, but daily, as a rhythm, as a sacred non-negotiable. Not out of obligation, but because you understand the cost of neglect. When you neglect your thought life, it doesn't stay neutral. It defaults to old grooves, old judgments, old reactions, unconscious narratives that whisper, "This is just how it is." And slowly, those whispers build a structure, a climate, a world. But the truth is, just how it is not fixed. It's only how it's been fed. This is not spiritual pressure. It's invitation. You don't need to overhaul your life in a day. You only need to be faithful to today's vibration. That's all life ever asks of you. This moment, this thought, this tone. That's your daily bread. And it isn't about intensity. It's about consistency. You don't have to conjure massive energy. You only need to stay close to center, to let your mind return to what's real again and again until it becomes your resting place. And when it slips, as it will, you don't scold it. You return, gently, repeatedly. That rhythm becomes your strength. Emmet Fox taught that if you would hold a single divine idea, truly hold it, not just think it casually, for even 5 minutes a day, your life would begin to shift. Not because of magic, but because of law. Because the seed, once planted with feeling, begins to grow, even if you don't see the sprout right away. But most people uproot their seeds too soon. They plant a new thought in the morning, then dig it up by noon. With doubt, with frustration, with contradiction, they say, "It's not working," but they haven't given it time to root. And rooting takes rhythm, not obsession, not strain. Rhythm, like breath, like heartbeat, like sunrise. So what if, instead of trying to manifest everything at once, you just committed to feeding one thought today? What if you chose peace, and noticed every time your mind drifted into panic? What if you chose abundance, and caught yourself mid-scarcity spiral, not with guilt, but with awareness? What if you chose love? Not emotional love, but the knowing that you are one with all life, and let that guide your tone, your posture, your response. These are not small acts. They are cosmic declarations. Every time you choose truth over reaction, you create new pathways in consciousness. And those pathways become roads, and those roads become highways. And before long, your life flows in a different direction, not because the outer world changed, but because you did. You became someone who plants with intention, who feeds what is holy, who chooses their thought like a craftsman shapes their tool. And over time, that craftsmanship builds something sacred. Your mind becomes fertile ground, your emotions stabilize, your speech uplifts, your presence carries weight, not because you forced it, but because you fed it, daily, quietly, faithfully. This is spiritual maturity. It's not about mountaintop moments. It's about showing up for your inner life like it matters, because it does, more than anything else. So tomorrow when the alarm goes off or your feet hit the floor, remember, today is not just another day. It is the field, and you are the sower. The law will not mock you. It will reflect you. So feed what you want to grow, even if no one sees it yet, even if the results are still below the surface. Feed peace, feed clarity, feed strength. That is your daily bread. Take it seriously. Because nothing else you build will outlast what you feed in thought. There is a path narrow and steep that few ever walk long enough to know where it leads, not because it is hidden, not because it is forbidden, but because it asks something few are willing to give: attention. Not attention in the sense of ambition, not the kind of focus used to climb ladders or chase goals, but a sacred attention, quiet, steady, piercing through the noise of surface life, the kind of attention that refuses to entertain illusion, even when it's wrapped in comfort. This is the narrow path Jesus spoke of, not a route of moral rigidity, not a checklist of behaviors, a state of consciousness that chooses alignment over approval, clarity over distraction, depth over drama. You will not find crowds here, you will not find applause, because the narrow path is not about performing holiness, it's about returning again and again to the inner altar of truth, even when no one is watching, especially when no one is watching. It is not glamorous, it is not loud. Some days it feels like silence stretched too thin, some days it feels like exile. But it is the only path that leads to freedom that lasts, not because it is punishing, but because it is refining. It strips you, not cruelly, precisely. It begins to remove the false structures, the roles you thought you needed, the stories you told to stay safe, the identities built on reaction. It doesn't rip them away. It lets them die, layer by layer as you stop feeding them. And then something terrifying happens. You begin to feel exposed. The performances no longer work. The comforts no longer comfort. The scaffolding begins to fall. And what remains is not yet beautiful. It is raw, empty, too still. This is the sink. The point where many turn back. They say it's too hard, too quiet, too slow. They mistake absence for failure. They long for the familiar weight of illusion, even if it was heavy. But if you can stay, if you can breathe in the barrenness and not panic, something breaks. Not in you, around you. The shell cracks, the numbness lifts, and for the first time, you don't feel spiritual in the way you expected. You feel present, not high, not certain, just here, raw, alive, unveiled. You begin to walk without performance. You speak without needing to be right. You pray without trying to get something. You listen to life itself, not for answers, but for rhythm. And that rhythm changes you. You begin to sense a thread that runs through all things, a current beneath appearances, not because you've become mystical, but because you've become available. Available to guidance that doesn't shout. Available to truth that doesn't flatter. Available to love that doesn't need to explain itself. This is the true path. And it is narrow, not in its requirements, but in its clarity. There is no room for double-mindedness here, no space for divided attention. You cannot serve fear and truth at the same time. That is not a threat. That is anatomy. Your consciousness cannot radiate two frequencies at once. And the narrow path is simply the choice to let your thought be governed by one master, Spirit. This doesn't mean you never falter. It means you know where to return, quickly, quietly. With no need to explain or justify, you become someone the world doesn't quite understand. You no longer move the way they move. You don't chase what they chase. You don't panic like you used to. You don't react to everything loud, because you've chosen the inner stillness over the outer storm. And it's not because you've transcended life. It's because you've finally entered it, fully. The narrow path leads through everything you once avoided. It takes you through your shame, not around it. Through your grief, not over it. Through your illusion of control, and into the space where surrender stops being a concept and becomes a way of being. And on the other side, if there is one, is not a prize, but a posture. You move differently. You carry something invisible, but unmistakable. You become trustworthy, not because you say the right things, but because you are no longer at war with yourself. This is not a promise that life gets easier. It's a promise that you will no longer be ruled by confusion, that clarity will find you, that your steps will be ordered, not perfectly, but faithfully. The narrow path is not narrow to keep people out. It is narrow because truth doesn't widen itself to fit fear. And when you choose it, not once, but daily, in thought, in silence, in action, you become someone new, not through effort, but through yielding. And in that yielding, you remember what you are, not a seeker, not a struggler, but a vessel of the very order you used to chase. So walk, steady, quiet, no drama, just depth. You are on the path now, and the path is in you. What you value reveals everything about your life. Not what you say you value, not what you post about, but what you quietly give your attention to, minute by minute, day after day. That is your treasure, and your treasure always leads your consciousness. When Jesus said, "Where your treasure is, there will your heart be also," he wasn't warning against material possessions. He was exposing a law. Attention is not casual, it is creative. It doesn't just reflect what matters to you, it builds what becomes real to you. And in spiritual terms, what you value doesn't just sit in your mind as preference. It sets your vibration. It shapes your field. It determines what you are open to and what you unconsciously repel. So when you hold resentment as treasure, when you keep it close, polish it, rehearse it, you may not say you want bitterness, but your energy tells the truth. When you obsess over control, praise, image, or validation, it doesn't matter how spiritual your language is. Your treasure is rooted in form. And so your vibration becomes reactive, hollow, hungry. The spiritual path is not about pretending not to care about outcomes. It is about reordering your values at the level of being, not by denial, but by insight. You start to notice how much of your life has been invested in fragile things, titles, appearances, being right, being liked. None of them evil, but none of them stable. They rise and fall with time. And when your center depends on what changes, your life becomes a chase, a constant recalibration, trying to hold together what was never meant to last. That's the rise, when you begin to realize how misaligned your attention has been. When it dawns on you that most of what you've built your identity on isn't inherently wrong, it's just insufficient. And that moment can feel thrilling, until it doesn't. Because the moment after the rise is the sink. When you look around and realize you've been rich in anxiety, rich in drama, rich in proving yourself, but poor in peace. You see how your conversations have been filled with trying to be understood, trying to explain, trying to impress. You see how you've fed the same thought loops for years, not because you're flawed, but because you didn't know where your treasure was pointing you. And that seeing is heavy. It's the weight of self-honesty, and it doesn't flatter. It strips. It brings a stillness that doesn't feel sacred at first. It just feels empty, like a life full of motion but missing meaning. This is the break. When the illusion that things external, shifting things can give you lasting identity finally cracks. You can't unknow it. You can't go back to the old reward systems and still feel alive. You've tasted something deeper, even if you can't name it yet. And now, the only way forward is inward. You begin to shift your values, not because someone told you to, but because your soul is tired of bankruptcy, tired of being rich in surface and starved for essence. You start asking better questions. What kind of peace lasts? What kind of connection feeds? What kind of truth doesn't bend when I'm afraid? And you begin to see the only treasure that can hold you is the treasure of the invisible. Not invisible as in distant, but invisible as in fundamental qualities, vibration, alignment. You start to value clarity over drama, silence over noise, sincerity over performance, presence over distraction. And as your values shift, so does your life. Quietly, deeply, sometimes painfully. Because the people who fed on your old values will feel you changing, and some will leave. Not out of malice, but because you no longer vibrate at the level of the performance. And in that shedding, something sacred returns. The awareness that you don't need to be understood to be whole, that you don't need to be applauded to be valid, that you don't need to explain yourself to be right with your own soul. You begin to live by internal compass, not rigid, not inflexible, but true. And your treasure becomes the state of consciousness you keep, not the circumstances you control. You notice that peace is worth more than being right. That alignment is more nourishing than approval. That joy isn't found in reaching, but in resting. This doesn't make you passive, it makes you precise. You start to say no to the invitations that once flattered you. You stop feeding the conversations that once sustained your ego. You stop confusing stimulation for growth. And as the noise falls away, you hear something quieter, something deeper. A frequency of truth that doesn't need to shout. A presence that doesn't demand anything but your attention. That presence is the kingdom, and it lives where your treasure lives. So choose carefully, not with fear, with love. Value what lasts. Value what liberates. Value what cannot be shaken by external change. Because in the end, you become what you value, and the treasure you choose today becomes the life you live tomorrow. To seek first the kingdom is not a poetic aspiration. It is a spiritual directive grounded in absolute metaphysical clarity. It isn't about adding prayer to a busy schedule or sprinkling affirmations over an anxious mind. It's about priority at the level of consciousness. It means ordering your inner world so that truth is not a decoration. It is the foundation. Most people live in reverse. They chase solutions, collect strategies, analyze symptoms. Only when the wheels fall off, when the relationship collapses, when the diagnosis comes, when the money runs out, do they reach inward. And even then, the search is usually conditional. It begins from fear, not alignment. It starts with the problem and hopes spirit will clean it up. But spirit does not clean up chaos from the outside in. It brings order from the center outward. Jesus didn't say, "Fix your outer life and the kingdom will appear." He said the opposite. "Seek first the kingdom, and all these things shall be added unto you." Not earned, not wrestled for, added. As a natural result of vibration aligning with Source. The kingdom is not a reward. It's not the prize for moral behavior. It is a living field of consciousness, ever present, always available, but only to those who are willing to tune their frequency to it. Not because God is withholding, but because law is precise. You cannot receive from a vibration you do not match. This is the heartbreak of so many sincere spiritual seekers. They try, they meditate, they speak the language of faith. But underneath, the vibration is still rooted in anxiety. They seek peace as a remedy for their panic, not as a return to their nature. And so the panic becomes their center. The kingdom becomes a strategy, and law responds, not to the word spoken, but to the energy sustained. To seek first the kingdom means to relocate the center of your being, to withdraw your allegiance from appearances and place it firmly, quietly, without theatricality, in divine order. It is to say, I no longer define my identity by what is happening around me. I define it by what I know to be true, even if I cannot see it yet. And this choice must be made daily, sometimes hourly, because the world is magnetic in its chaos. It will seduce you back into urgency, into image, into reacting. It will hand you headlines and pressure and noise, and all of it will seem so important. But none of it can give you what alignment gives you in a single moment of stillness. Stillness is not the absence of movement. It is the presence of center. And from that center, your thoughts become sharper, your energy cleaner, your speech more precise. You begin to create rather than chase, respond rather than react, decide rather than doubt. And the outer world? It begins to shift. Not always dramatically, sometimes imperceptibly, but steadily. Because now the order flows from within. You're no longer trying to force circumstances to behave. You're no longer bargaining with God. You're no longer using spiritual practice as a shortcut to comfort. You're rooted. And from that root, the branches grow. This is the rhythm of real power, not dominance, but coherence. You realize that much of what you used to pray for was misaligned to begin with. You were asking for things that could never stabilize you because your inner world was unstable. You were trying to build a life on sand and wondering why it kept collapsing. And then something breaks. You stop trying to bend life to your will. You let go of the scaffolding, the trying, the fixing, the spiritual performance, and you begin to receive instead. Not passively, but receptively, creatively. Receiving is not weakness. It is strength at rest. It is the posture of someone who knows they are already in the flow of truth, who no longer needs to demand, but simply allows the law to function. You will know you're seeking the kingdom first when your peace becomes non-negotiable, when you no longer hand it over to every rude comment, to every late payment, to every delay. Not because you're numb, but because you've chosen where your real life lives, and it is not in externals. You stop measuring your value by metrics. You stop chasing outcomes as proof. You stop using manifestation as a scoreboard. And you begin to walk through life with a presence that doesn't need validation to feel real. Others will notice. Some won't understand. Some will think you've stopped caring. But it's the opposite. You've stopped clinging. And from that release comes a power they don't recognize, but they will feel. You become a stabilizing force, not through charisma, but through congruence. The inside matches the outside. The word matches the energy. The desire matches the discipline, and things begin to be added unto you: peace, clarity, right action, timely support, but not as the center, as the byproduct. Because the kingdom is the center, and everything else finds its place when the center is strong. This doesn't mean your life will never shake. It means you won't collapse when it does. You will bend without breaking. You will speak without spinning. You will trust, not in outcomes, but in order. To seek first the kingdom is to order your life from within, to let the invisible shape the visible, to let the eternal define the temporary. And when you live from that place, everything changes, slowly, completely, forever. There is a place within you that no one else can enter. No voice reaches it, no surface noise survives it. It is neither thought nor emotion. It's not even identity. It is the still point at the center of your being, the secret chamber. Jesus spoke of it not with mysticism, but with clarity. When you pray, enter into your closet and shut the door. Not a literal room, a mental posture, a withdrawal from noise, from narrative, from performance. Shut the door. Close off the world's demands, the mind's theater, the echo of what others expect. And from there, commune. This is not retreat. This is return, not hiding, but homecoming. The secret chamber is not about escaping life. It is about connecting with life itself, beneath appearances. It is where the kingdom lives, not as a theory but as presence. And it is not accessed by volume or ritual. It opens through stillness. Stillness is not silence. Stillness is sovereignty. It is the place where your mind unhooks from doing and reconnects with being. And in that being, clarity comes, not all at once, but unmistakably. But this stillness does not welcome the impatient. It does not offer itself to those who come seeking performance or emotional highs or cosmic spectacle. It offers itself to those who are willing to sit in the empty space long enough for truth to speak without decoration. And that wait can feel like death. The rise of entering the secret place often feels like a spiritual moment. You light a candle, say a word, and for a few seconds, there's a peace. But then comes the sink. The silence lingers. Thoughts crowd in. Emotions rise. You remember Bill's wounds, unfinished tasks, and worst of all, you feel nothing divine. You feel nothing at all. This is the break, the place where most abandon the practice. They believe it failed, that God is distant, that they are doing it wrong. But the silence is not absence. It is the burning off of distraction. It is not the void. It is the stripping of everything you brought into the space that doesn't belong there. It is the cleansing of the mental altar. Stay. Don't flinch. Don't fill it. Don't narrate it. Let the silence hollow you out until what remains is not your story, not your striving, but your core. The secret chamber doesn't entertain, it purifies. It removes the layers that you thought made you spiritual, the opinions, the affirmations, the self-definitions, and leaves only awareness. And in that awareness, eventually, quietly, something ancient returns, not in words, in presence. You realize, I do not need to create God's presence. I need only to become undistracted enough to recognize it. This is not an emotional high. It is the end of mental noise. And in its place, a gentle certainty arises, like a current under your feet. You are not praying to something. You are abiding in something. You begin to see. Prayer is not asking. It is attuning. It is the art of stepping out of time and into order. And when you leave the chamber, things are not the same. Not because the room has changed. Because you have. You no longer move from reaction. You no longer speak from tension. You carry the chamber with you, not as a bubble, but as a compass. You know where the center is now. And you return there often, not out of duty, but out of need. Because life will pull at you. Chaos will beg for your attention. People will praise and criticize you in the same breath. And none of it will mean much if you have not anchored in something deeper than reputation. The secret place is not an escape hatch. It is your headquarters. And from there, your decisions shift. Your tone changes. Your very presence becomes more precise. And that precision is what changes your life. You stop being tossed around by outer storms because the storm is no longer inside you. You stop searching for signs because you are the signal now. You stop asking for peace because you've become its resting place. This is not mysticism. This is practical authority. Authority doesn't shout. It doesn't panic. It doesn't prove. It simply stands, rooted in what is real. And what is real comes only from the inner chamber, not from books, not from borrowed beliefs, but from presence. So, go in, shut the door, wait until the noise dissolves. Let the silence offend your impatience. Let it break what must be broken. Let it rearrange your priorities. And when the stillness speaks, listen, not for instruction, but for alignment. Because once aligned, you don't need constant guidance. You carry the compass inside. And the outer world? It begins to recognize you as one who knows where home is. And nothing is more magnetic than someone who has been to the center and come back empty of ego but full of clarity. There are wounds you no longer speak of. They've calcified beneath your rituals, hardened under your wisdom, not because you've healed, but because the pain has become a shape you carry. You've learned how to live around it, to decorate it with language, to reframe it so well that even you believe it's gone. But it hasn't left. It has only grown quiet. And in that silence it still directs you. This is where forgiveness begins. Not as an act toward another, not as a noble declaration, but as a reckoning with the weight you've normalized. The subtle heaviness in your chest, the reflex to guard, to doubt, to brace. These are not personality traits. They are signals. They reveal that a story still owns part of you. And as long as that story owns you, the kingdom remains dimmed. Not because you're unworthy, but because you're divided. You cannot live fully from love while secretly still bonded to pain. Emmet Fox once said, "You must forgive everyone if you would be healed." And he meant it literally. Forgiveness isn't spiritual courtesy, it is energetic release. It is the only key that unlocks the doors you don't realize you've locked from the inside. But real forgiveness, deep soul-level forgiveness, is not easy. At first, it rises like strength. You tell yourself, "I'm ready." You gather insight. You reframe the situation. You even feel peace for a moment. But then the sink comes. The memories rise, not in thought but in vibration. You feel the edge of betrayal again, the quiet humiliation, the helplessness of having your trust broken, not just once, but many times. And worse, you feel how deeply it shaped you. You see that you've built parts of your life in reaction to that pain, habits of control, avoidance, emotional detachment. You believed you were becoming wiser, stronger, but underneath, you were armoring yourself, not evolving, surviving. And now to forgive would mean to lay that armor down, not symbolically, literally, to let the story unravel, to release your role in it, to stop using it to explain your patterns, to stop needing it to justify your walls. This is the break, the terrifying freedom of no longer being the victim, the quiet realization that if you truly forgive, you lose your excuse for staying small. And that is where many pause. Because pain, for all its cost, has a purpose. It gives you shape. It gives you identity. It gives you a reason for why things are the way they are. But the moment you let it go, you become accountable for your expansion. You no longer carry the contract that says, "I can't move forward because of what they did." You become available to more life. And that is where the real fear lives. Forgiveness is not weakness. It is the fiercest decision a soul can make. To no longer be tethered. To no longer carry the emotional corpse of what happened. To no longer need repayment in order to feel whole. And this includes yourself. Because the person you struggle to forgive most, the one who made the choices, missed the signs, broke the promise, ignored the intuition, that person lives inside your skin. And so does their guilt, their shame, their secret regret. And you've tried to grow past it. You've read the books, learned the lessons, changed the habits. But somewhere deep, there's still a version of you left behind, frozen at the point of impact. You can't skip this. You can't transcend it with language. You have to go back, not to relive it, but to reclaim it. You have to sit with that former self, not to judge, but to integrate, to tell them they don't have to carry it anymore, that their punishment is over, that the debt is cleared. You have to become your own redeemer. Not by erasing the past, but by stopping the loop. Forgiveness is how you stop reliving. It's how you walk out of the mental rooms you've redecorated as growth, but never truly left. It's how you stop needing others to be sorry before you feel free. Because some people will never be sorry. Some will never understand. Some will never return what they took. And waiting for that moment is waiting to breathe. But when you forgive, you breathe again. You don't excuse. You don't forget. You simply withdraw your energy. You reclaim your aliveness. You let the pain complete its arc instead of circling forever. This is not an overnight act. It's a process of dislodging energy. It may happen in tears, in quiet realizations, in moments where you break down for no reason you can explain. That's the deadness lifting. It feels like grief because it is, not just grief for what was done, but for who you became while carrying it. But once it clears, you are new, not theoretically, structurally. You move differently. You no longer flinch at the memory. You no longer construct your life to avoid the past. You have nothing to defend. You are no longer echoing the injury. You are radiating wholeness. And that's when the kingdom opens. Not because you earned it, but because your vibration is no longer at war with itself. You've dropped the weight. You've surrendered the grudge. You've returned to the place within you that has never been hurt, never been abandoned, never been broken. And from that place, everything changes. It's been there the whole time, beneath your questions, beneath your grasping, beneath your pain. It's been there. The kingdom. Not a place you reach, not a state you earn, but a presence that was always waiting to be lived. You tried to climb toward it. You tried to deserve it. You tried to make sense of why it felt distant. But it was never distant. Only your attention wandered. Only your mind, pulled in 1,000 directions, built barriers where none existed. And yet, even in your forgetting, the kingdom remained unmoved, undiminished, whole. You don't arrive at the kingdom by force. You awaken into it. You stop trying to become worthy of it, and finally remember you are made of it, not in part, in essence. This is the final paradox. The very thing you've been searching for is not ahead of you. It is within you, under every layer you've placed between yourself and truth. Emmet Fox taught that the kingdom of God is not a reward, but a condition, and that condition begins the moment you surrender the story of exile, the moment you stop trying to fix what was never broken at the root, the moment you release your addiction to striving and consent to being. But that consent feels like death at first, because everything in you that has clung to identity through effort, through resistance, through proving, all of that must go quiet, not in shame, in reverence. This is the rise. When your spirit begins to remember what your mind tried to control, when your inner being stops chasing and starts listening, when you begin to taste what stillness was trying to teach you all along, and then comes the sink. You realize how many years you've lived outside yourself, how often you mistook noise for guidance, how long you've looked to outer conditions to mirror back your worth. And it hits. Not as regret, but as ache. The ache of having abandoned your own center, not knowingly, but repeatedly. This is the hardest moment, the place of hollow recognition, not dramatic, just still. You see how every desperate move, every frantic thought, every anxious prayer was born from forgetting. You weren't bad. You weren't broken. You were just asleep. And the awakening is not loud. It's not emotional. It is still, deep, final. This is the break. The point where the game ends, the mental script drops. You stop managing your awakening like a task list. You stop comparing your peace to someone else's. You stop trying to feel spiritual and start feeling here. The kingdom becomes real, not as a concept, but as atmosphere. You no longer interpret every delay as a threat. You no longer need every answer to come on your timeline. You stop praying from fear and begin radiating from truth. And life, slowly and without applause, rearranges itself. Not because you finally got everything right, but because you stopped contradicting the truth with every thought. You stopped leaking your power to old narratives. You stopped using the future to delay your wholeness. You're no longer seeking the kingdom. You're living it. And living it looks different than you imagined. You're not glowing all the time. You're not above emotions. But you are rooted. In every moment, in traffic, in conflict, in silence, in uncertainty. You don't flinch from life anymore because you're no longer using it as a mirror for your self-worth. You speak slower, not out of caution, but out of alignment. You listen deeper, not out of politeness, but because truth no longer needs to rush. You work, you love. You move through this world not to win it, but to serve from wholeness. This is what Jesus meant. The kingdom is not in the sky. It is not later. It is not if you're good enough. It is at hand, which means within reach, which means now. And now that you've seen it, now that you've remembered, you can never fully forget again. The world may try to pull you back into urgency, into distraction, into fear, but it won't work the same way, because part of you knows you carry the kingdom in your tone, in your breath, in your refusal to live below truth ever again. You don't need to announce it. You don't need to convince anyone. You simply live it. And in that living, you become what the world forgot it needed, a presence of quiet power, unwavering clarity, and holy simplicity. You don't explain peace. You embody it. And that embodiment becomes your offering, not because you're trying to change the world, but because you are no longer being changed by it. The kingdom is realized not in theory, but in action, not in beliefs, but in vibration. And now, it is yours. You've returned to what was never lost. You've arrived at what never left. You are home. Let it settle now. Not as conclusion, but as quiet confirmation. You've walked through layers, not just of thought, but of self, for 15 chapters. Not to find new beliefs, but to shed the ones that no longer serve. Not to become something different, but to finally allow what you always were to emerge without resistance. Take a breath, not as a technique, but as recognition. You've heard enough, not in volume, but in depth. The words were only ever pointing. The truth you touched, that subtle, unmistakable current beneath it all, that is yours now. It was always yours. This isn't the end of a lesson. It's the beginning of a posture, one that doesn't rush to apply or prove or capture the feeling in notes. Let it live unspoken for now. Let the stillness do what explanation never could. You may feel tired. That's not fatigue, it's release. The kind that comes when tension begins to loosen in places you didn't realize were holding so tightly. That dull weight in the body? It's where story has begun to drain. Let it go. Don't interpret. Just allow. Let your sleep tonight be unguarded. Let your body receive what your mind has begun to remember. You do not need to integrate this. It is already integrating you. And when you wake, you may not feel different. But your inner tone will have shifted. A little less urgency. A little more space. You'll notice what you used to react to. You'll pause where you once rushed. You'll remember, again and again, that the kingdom is not a place to reach. It is the presence you return to in each breath, in each choice. Nothing more needs to be added. You are full. You are home.